Payers want real-world evidence, and traditionally, drug companies were not allowed to provide that evidence unless they had collected the data in randomized controlled trials. So FDAMA 114 was an attempt to deal with this issue, and it allows drug companies to talk about economic endpoints to payers with a different evidence standard. Instead of randomized controlled trials, which is usually called substantial evidence, FDAMA 114 changes the standard to competent and reliable scientific evidence. So the idea is the drug company should have more flexibility to talk about economic outcomes. The problem is we've never had guidance from the FDA. We've never had any regulatory precedents in terms of warning letters or notice of violation from the FDA. So there's always been a lot of speculation about what companies are allowed to do, what precisely the evidence standards are. We have 11 case studies, and we've tried to array these in order of how close they are to the on-label information. That is, how close the health economic information is to the on-label information. So, for example, companies may want to use real-world data to cost out clinical outcomes that they studied in clinical trials. So we have we have several examples of how companies might use real-world data to promote economic content. For example, costing out clinical events, looking at the costs of hospitalization, cost of emergency room visits that might be impacted by pharmaceutical therapies. For example, looking at drug adherence and whether a promotional claim that involves adherence would be allowable under Section 114 of FDAMA. Looking at economic models and whether economic models would be allowed under Section 114 of FDAMA. The statute from Section 114 is worded in a rather general way. So it's hard to say with any definitiveness whether these case studies would be allowable or not allowable. But the purpose of this paper is really to raise examples, raise questions, explore possibilities. I think it depends a lot on one's interpretation of the language of Section 114. Personally, I think the language of Section 114 should allow some of these examples. Other cases, I think there may be more debate. But again, the purpose is to advance the discussion and talk about the kinds of information that payers presumably need.